Hello everyone, I hope you guys are doing well. New video, new year, happy new year to all of you. It's not too late to wish you a happy new year. Last Friday, I organized a Q&A on my Instagram, and a lot of you asked me a question, and actually one of you asked me the perfect question. One of you asked me that question on that day on Instagram. However, I got a lot of people who request me the difference between the French flour and the American flour. Because some of you are opening a bakery or have already a bakery and you want to know what flour to use, what's best. So today I'm going to explain you my version of what flour to use and why. Let's go. All right, we are going to do a comparison between the American average bread flour and the French average bread flour, which we call usually the T55, okay? We'll do the comparison and we'll explain also the impact in the bake. All right, let's start by comparing a little bit these two flour. And let's start with our American bread flour. Biggest advantage, amount of protein, okay? Automatically, even if you go with a winter wheat or a spring wheat, the quality and the amount of protein is stronger than the French flour. So why is it an advantage? Well, automatically you will have more volume and much easier process compared to a French flour. The biggest disadvantage is the know-how in the milling industry. There is none, or really the smallest amount. If you want some information on your flour to your milling company, they will usually give you a falling number and a farinograph, which is really the basic information. Big lack of know-how. But why? Simply because they don't need to know. You know, it's like they have the quality of the wheat, they just crush it, make a flour from it, it's working well. The problem with that is that your flour is kind of bland. There is no extra flavor, it's very rare. There is few milling companies in the US who are doing an excellent job, but I'm talking about the average, the big production, okay? And it's very bland, the color is not there, you know, it's going to be very white. So if you want some color, you need to play with different type of flour, whole wheat, rye, etc., corazon and stuff. So that's really a disadvantage. It could be so perfect if there was a little bit more work on the milling side, you know, playing with some toasted flour, have something, you know, like have some flavors, have something. So that's really the downside for me. If we talk about the French flour, so French flour, on the other way, that's a very strong know-how in terms of the milling industry. And so strong that I think that the milling industry in France like is really in power in terms of the bakery world. You know, they control the bakery world. Because for years, when I learned in France, I didn't even know there was ingredients in the flour. You know, they were not talking about it. Or maybe, you know, everyone was kind of closing their eyes, didn't want to know. Now it's changing, so people really start to know what's happening inside the flour. But why? Because in France, it's a much smaller country. It's much harder to have some wheat very strong. So we can see it inside the flour. So technically, the French flour will have less protein. Okay, less protein and less quality protein. So this is also very important. And this is why the know-how is so strong, because in France, milling will use between 10 to 15 different types of wheat. And why, you will ask? Probably because they want to play with the color of the crumb, color of the crust. They want to play with the W, you know, so the PNL. So all of that is technically the result coming from the alvéographe de Chopin. Alvéographe de Chopin is a very in-depth information about your flour in terms of extensibility, elasticity. Okay, remember every time I talk about these two, which are very important in bakery. So extensibility, it's when you take your dough and you know you take it and it's not coming back. And elasticity, it's when you take your dough and you have difficulties and it's coming back. So it's very important to have kind of a balance in between these two. Okay, you need some extensibility. Okay, definitely. But if you are too extensible, automatically it means that during the fermentation it's not going to hold properly and you won't have the volume that you need. On the other way, if you have too much elasticity, then your product is very round and it's going to be harder to eat. So it's really about the balance. Now let's talk a little bit about ingredient list. Yes, because ingredient list is important in flour. Again, remember, we are talking about the average flour from the US and from France, okay? You can definitely find some flour without anything, just written flour on it, wheat flour. So definitely you can find it. I'm talking about the average flour. If we are looking at the American ingredient list, it's usually a little bit shorter than the French one. So you will find at first definitely wheat flour, no doubt. But then following that, you will have probably some barley malt flour. So the barley malt flour is going to help us for the fermentation of your product. So when you add some barley malt flour or wheat malt flour, the term is malt. When you add some malt in your flour, it's to reduce the falling number. Remember, every time this American milling companies, they will give you the falling number. You need it, it's very important. The French one will give it as well. When you get to above 400 seconds on the falling number, you don't have a lot of alpha amylase, so the fermentation of your product will be much longer. So you will probably need to use more yeast. Again, depends on where you are working, but we all try to reduce the amount of yeast to have very long fermentation, so you need to have some activity. The malt is going to help us for that. And then you will have some vitamins in the flour, simply because it's the FDA requirement in the US, so they will add some vitamins. All right, now let's jump on the French flour. And I don't know if you are aware, right now there is actually some big stories in France because there is like a supermarket called Leclerc who is doing his baguette, his French baguette at 29 cents. And a lot of people are being scared because there is an intensive ingredient list. And I want to talk about it quickly. So first of all, we'll talk about the average ingredient list on the French flour, okay? Let's start. First of all, wheat flour. Well, again, no surprise. Second ingredient, some gluten. Yes, most of the French flour have a little bit of gluten inside. This is to compensate the amount of protein that we have in our flour, which is pretty low. So we are adding a little bit of gluten to help us to get to a proper level to help the bakers. Then the next ingredient is ascorbic acid. Again, most of the time in France, we are adding a little bit of ascorbic acid in the flour. So we call it the E300. This is simply to help us during the mixing process and to get a little bit more volume out of it. Big stories around it. I'm not the biggest fan of ascorbic acid. I can understand why some bakers are using it, because when you are having some intensive production, you need a little bit of help. I'm not going to comment about that. You have your idea, I have my own, so it's totally fine. But in French flour, it's there. And then there is enzymes. Enzymes, I think it's really not well known and it's every time scary. So here, what you will see on your ingredient list is the alpha amylase. So alpha amylase, what is it? Alpha amylase is what it's going to replace your malt. In this flour, again, average French flour, we don't put any malt. We use some alpha amylase. Why? Because the malt, you will add maybe 0.05%, 0.1% max, okay, when you have a weaker flour. The alpha amylase, we are going to add maybe 2 grams per 100 kilo of flour. So in terms of quantity, it's much smaller and it will have the exact same impact as the malt, okay? Then the next one is the xylanase. Xylanase, it's another type of enzymes, and this is going to help us to structure the crumb a little bit. You know, it might help us to open the crumb a little bit on a baguette. It might help us to avoid to have a crumb too tight, okay? Again, it's an enzymes, and as all the enzymes, as soon as you bake it, as soon as you get to 90, 91 degrees at the core of your product, these enzymes die. So when you eat your bread, you have nothing, okay? You have just bread. You don't have anything, any enzymes, all right? If we were to come back on that project from Leclerc, you know. I'm not for it at all. None at all whatsoever. I think, you know, it needs, as a baker, you need to be, you need to appreciate the ingredient that you are using, and you need to pay for it. And, you know, it's like when you have a baker who is selling his baguette at €1 in France, and then you have these people who sell the baguette at 29 cents, it's not very fair. But again, I don't want to really enter in that. What's really annoying for me, I really feel that it's annoying, is that people are talking about having an ingredient list, and I'm going to show it on the side of the screen, of 14 ingredients. And yes, it has a lot of ingredients. Why? Because we need to put it on the ingredient list. But if you are looking closer, you have some gluten, you know, you have some ascorbic acid. Again, ascorbic acid, not very good, but guess what? Ascorbic acid, it's in your orange juice, it's in your, what we call in France, Doliprane, so it's like Advil, you know. You will find some ascorbic acid a little bit everywhere. And every time people are like so scared of seeing ascorbic acid in a bread, but in other ingredients, they're not scared. So it's just a little bit of being hypocrite, you know. I don't really appreciate that, but again, that's fine. Now the thing is that it's enzymes. A lot of people, they don't know what's enzymes. They see xylanase, alpha amylase, hemicellulase, and they're like, oh my gosh, what's this, all this ingredient? Well, guess what? To digest, you know, in your own body to digest, you have enzymes. You have some protease, you know. You have some, you need that. You need that to survive. So why people are so scared of seeing some enzymes on the bread, you know? It's like, I don't get it. But again, it's education. You know, when you watch the TV, they show you like all these names and like, they scare you, but no one is educating, you know. It's like, let's get some time here and actually like put in your comment below if you want to see a video one of these days where I explain a little bit some of the enzymes, because I'm lucky, I don't know if I'm lucky enough, but I'm working in a company where we are like working a lot with enzymes, and I start to understand a little bit. Again, as a baker, I'm not very deep into it, but I can understand a little bit the usage from it. So if you're interested, let me know, I can do a video on that. But to come back on our baguette, I think we need some education, and we need to explain people what is it, what are you eating, and why are we using enzymes. Okay, let's not be scared. Let's learn. Okay, let's understand why. Anyway, that was my 2 cents. I won't bother you with that. Let's move on now. All right, talk a little bit about enzymes and stuff, but let's come back to bakery, okay? I've been in the US now for almost 6 years, and I got the habit of talking, when I talk with a flour, you know, about a flour, I talk about protein. Wrong, right, I don't know, but that's now how I'm talking. So if we are talking as the American bread flour, as I said earlier, it's a stronger protein. So I like to use that American bread flour to make some viennoiserie. You know, I want to make some croissant, I want to make some brioche. I feel it's a pretty good flour, because when you make this type of product, you don't need really so much of the flavor from the flour. And I don't want to use a T45 in France, you know, which is going to be usually stronger in protein. You will have around 16% of protein. And I feel that's too strong. So I prefer to use a bread flour. It gives some good volume without being too crazy. And what's important also is that it doesn't give a lot of shawiness at the end of your product. Because again, that's something we don't really realize. But you know, when you eat a brioche, when you eat a croissant, it needs to melt. Because you have a lot of fat, you have a lot of sugar, so it needs to melt. You don't want to chew for very long. And maybe have a look on your side, you know, on some product that you can buy in different bakeries. Sometimes bakers prefer to use stronger flour, just simply because it's easier. You are sure not to, you know, to have some issues if you overproof or if you have any issue during the process. But sometimes when it's too easy, it's not very good. I prefer to be a little bit challenged, and the bread flour for this type of product is perfect. Now, however, when I want to make a bread, you know, like a sourdough baguette or, you know, something with some flavor, something with some fermentation, I like to use the French flour because, as I explained earlier, they do a lot of blend, you know, with the different wheat. So you will have some nice color, so you will have some nice crumb opening. I kind of prefer that. Again, matter of taste, you know. Again, remember, lower in protein. So when I will eat that bread, it's not going to be chewy, it's going to melt. It can give a little bit of, how can I say that in English? Like, you know, kind of almost a greasy crumb. Not greasy, but, you know, like a little bit thicker and nice to eat, you know, and not chewy. That's the most important. That's what I'm looking for when I eat a bread. I don't want to be chewy. I want to be short in the mouth and, you know, have all the proper flavor. Also, if I use a French flour, I have some possibilities to play with some pre-ferment. You know, I can do some polish, I can do some autolyse. It's much more open for me. If I use an American flour to do a bread, usually I prefer to use only autolyse because the autolyse is going to break down a little bit the strength of this flour. I cannot really do a polish, or at least it's what I'm thinking, and you can be totally against what I'm saying, and the comments are open down below, and because I want to know your experience. But if you do a polish with an American flour, you will bring a lot of strength to the dough, and that strength will be there in the final product, so in terms of the chewiness. That's why using a French flour, I'm opening all my possibilities by using a lot of different type of pre-ferment and different type of process to play around. It's much easier. Alright guys, that's more or less what I wanted to talk about the flour. I don't want to go too deep in it. If you're interested in more videos, let me know. Also, very important, I really want to know your experience. I want to know if you are not agreeing with me whatsoever, because I'm totally open. You know, it's like if you follow me for like, you know, in Instagram for some time, you know that I'm very open-minded. It's totally fine if we don't agree together. It's just nice to be able to exchange. And yeah, so don't hesitate to comment in the comment box. And if you have any idea of future videos that you would like me to do, please let me know. It's every time cool. And I will see you next time. All right. You guys have a nice day. Bye-bye.